So I'm going to make a video that touches on a pop culture topic, which is something that I haven't done for a while. Haven't really done too many videos in general lately. But this weekend, me and my wife ate over at a friend's house with their entire family. So a good dozen or so people. And the burning topic of conversation. So this is an Orthodox Jewish household. Was a series called My Unorthodox Life. Now, my wife had been watching snippets of the show, and I'd been also watching sometimes with her. And to tell you the truth, before this weekend, I just thought of it as a very, shallow show and something that was definitely not very engaging and engrossing. So, but after the conversation yesterday, and realizing that part of the show deals with a community in New York called Muncie, New York State, in the Hudson Valley. So I think that the show's actually worse than boring. It's also a very big distortion of reality. So here's my take on it. To explain how the show is, there's a woman named Julia Hart who has left religious life. She was born in an ultra-Orthodox community, and her transformation to a secular and very, I would say, materialistic lifestyle began in her 40s as she started to develop a fashion brand and really become this upwardly mobile, chic person. And along the way, of course, she had to divorce her husband, who remained Orthodox and observant. And she also ended up dragging her kids along with her. I think that you could say that they went along willingly, apart from the youngest child. You can see in the image, the youngest child is on the bottom left. And as far as I know in the series, he remained religious. But the other children are sort of drifting along with her to a non-religious life. So that is the plot of the series. And of course, there are some side characters. There's her new husband, who's an Italian man, who's born in Italy. And she has a gay assistant. And much of the series revolves around her business, but also around her interactions with people from her old community, which is Muncie, New York. So before I keep going and give you my impression of the series, I will say that I personally don't think that if you're born into a religious home or come from a religious background, that you should feel obligated to stay in that lifestyle if you have changes of conscience or it's something that becomes unnecessarily stressful, because a lot of people, they end up burning out from it. And I've known plenty of people who do. So I know people who are born secular and became very religious. And I'm not talking about just Jews. I'm talking about also people I know who became very much connected to Christianity, evangelical Christianity, Seventh-day Adventism. I know people who grew up in Muslim households. I know people who grew up Catholic and remained Catholic. So I'm not talking about any specific religion or anything. Obviously, there's religions that I think are more illogical than others. But I have friends who left the Jewish Orthodox lifestyle too. And I can tell you that the notion that you're living in a prison, which is what she depicts, is very exaggerated, at least in most Orthodox communities. So I can tell you from personal experience that I've gone to Muncie, and while there obviously are people who are very strict and religious living in that community, from a plain observation, it's clear that she's not from one of the Hasidic communities. She's from what are called the Lithuanian Orthodox communities, the people who They may wear a suit and basically a kind of a fedora hat, but they are typically, yes, there are social conventions, there are expectations, there's a whole social hierarchy in place. But this idea that this is some sort of cult that you can't escape from, I think is grossly inaccurate. Also, the way that she portrays her own lifestyle, it shows somebody who is not leaving religion necessarily because of a philosophical difference with Judaism. And there are people who do. There are people who they wake up one day and they realize they don't believe in what they've been practicing for years. They are an atheist, or they've found a different religion and they move on to a different religion. This is not the case in my unorthodox life. And by the way, so there are people who they move from one religion to another for all sorts of reasons. This is not the case here. Okay, or they move from atheism to one religion, or from a religion to atheism. You've seen all sorts of people. This, by the way, we live in the United States. All of these changes are legal under law. If there are social pressures that prevent you from doing this, those are social pressures. But in this case, there's no evidence that anyone coerced her to stay within her community. There's no evidence that the husband tried to force her to remain within the marriage. There probably were custody battles in place. There seem to have been, based on the show itself. But the truth of the matter is that if you watch the show and you look at the dynamic between this woman and all of her children, I think that this is a plain grab at viewership, which they've succeeded. Granted, they've gotten people who express no interest in watching to watch because other people are watching it. And that's sometimes the best way to generate interest. It's rage bait, basically. And I was telling my wife this. The other thing that you get from the series is that this is a woman who is, I would say, very obsessed with sexualizing herself and people in her family. There are instances when one of her daughters discovers that she has disclosed details of the daughter's sexual life in a manuscript for a book. That's her life with her husband too. There are examples where this woman says unflattering things about, you could say unflattering things about her daughter's sexual life, about her son-in-law who's married to the daughter, about her other children. So the oldest daughter is the one who in the image is on the upper right. And to be honest with you, this is a woman who is, there's one stereotype, which I think, whether you're Jewish or you're not, it's very commonly associated with Jewish women, which is that they're very overbearing mothers and mothers-in-law. So that certainly fits in this series. She continually seems to bully all of her children into sort of conforming to her libertine and very promiscuous lifestyle. And there's numerous cases where she is wearing something that I would say it's very exposed clothing in shots that there's no necessity for her to wear them. Very kitschy designer clothes from Christian Dior. And I could say that it's a very obnoxious series. She seems to be following in the footsteps of Kim Kardashian, but trying to use her former identity in order to facilitate it. So Kim Kardashian, I would say, or I should say Kris Jenner and all the Kardashian clan, the way that they generated interest was their association with celebrity and with the Beverly Hills lifestyle. I think they live in. I've never seen the series, but their association with the very upscale lifestyle of Southern California or wherever they go, Miami. And these people are basically trying to grift off of the same idea, but make it seem as if there's a real journey that sees them finding their true nature and soul through rejecting religiosity. And that's the final point that I want to make, which may take a little bit of a while, but the notion that Orthodox Judaism is some sort of cloistered and far apart, distant, backward lifestyle, it can be true. There are people who live in a very bygone era. They eat food that's of, it's from over a century ago in terms of where the recipes come from. They basically eat food the way that people in Eastern Europe did back at the turn of the last century, right? And they've preserved their lifestyle, and many of them don't really look into anything resembling modern education. And there are people like that, and I'm not going to pretend that there are not. At the same time, there are people within the Orthodox Jewish community, just as there are Mormons, just as there are evangelical Christians, that are very high achieving, that open their own businesses, that are also successful professionally, and they might be very in tune spiritually with the way they are, right? It doesn't mean that you have to agree with their spiritual philosophy, but this notion that there's only one sort of reality within Orthodox Judaism, and that's some sort of prisoner lifestyle where women are disempowered and men basically dictate to them how their lives are going to be. And this woman emphasized, for example, that the people in Orthodox families don't have sex before marriage and therefore can never really understand what discovering yourself sexually can be like. Okay, well, here's the flip side. This is a woman who is all the time trying to expose her children to very risque sexual messages. At a certain point, she said, and this was something that disturbed me too, because her youngest son had been off to a summer camp which had a religious tendency, she said that her job was to counteract that tendency. And she did this by having some of her friends within the industry who were gay be in his vicinity. And that's I think, very irresponsible. You're trying to say that in order to compensate for your son living an educational lifestyle that you disagree with, you're going to go to a separate extreme and basically, show him that there is only two different ways to live. One is being very prudish, and the other one is to be very, liberated and uninhibited. That's not really the way life is. There's many people who they don't even grow up in religious households, but they don't have the personality or the social circle or the class status in order to have successful relationships with the opposite sex, or even to have good friendships. Forget about real sexual relationships. And to do that to a 14-year-old child, I think would constitute, psychological abuse. And that's the way I see a lot of this series. It's very disgusting. It paints a bad picture of the Orthodox community. It paints a bad picture of the Jewish community towards other people and Jews. And look, if you're a person who, you already have a critical view of the Jewish people, you don't like them that much, it's your right to look at this series and see it as evidence of your personal view of the Jewish community. I would say it's a huge inaccuracy. It's a it's a mistake to take this as an example of how Jewish life goes in Orthodox, ultra-Orthodox communities like Muncie. And I'll tell you from my experience, I've had to go to Muncie for work in the past year, and I don't really consider myself part of the ultra-Orthodox community. But generally, like, from patronizing businesses there, they're pretty nice. Granted, not everybody who works there is ultra orthodox. A lot of the people there, if I may say so, are from Central America. So you're not even getting so you go into a business that's meant usually for people of the very observant community. A lot of the staff happens to be from Central America. Is that a problem? Yes, because I think those people, they're working shitty jobs. And ultimately, I think that that's an unsustainable economic model. It's one that I don't really agree with. I would criticize that personally. They don't really touch on that. Because the notion that illegal immigration is a real problem in the country, that wouldn't make for a good Netflix series, right? The notion that there's a whole underclass of people from a foreign country that are being used as basically the grunts in our economy. They don't really want to talk about that aspect of why American society is messed up. And it's not only within the Jewish community. You see many of these supermarkets throughout the New York, New Jersey area of all different, just the regular supermarkets. Yeah, they have a lot of illegal immigrants in them. They don't touch on that. But you see them go through a supermarket. I've been to the same supermarket. She behaves as if she's being watched, as if she's some sort of spectacle that people look at or whatever. I've been to the same supermarket. Yes, the majority of people who go there are ultra-Orthodox. But you have regular people come in too. Regular people meaning people who are Jewish and non-observant, people who aren't Jewish at all, everything like that. It's not like they're going to treat you differently as a store. It's not as if the people who are from the Hasidic communities are going to gape at you as if they've never seen anything like this in their lives. They generally have seen people from outside their community because there's all sorts of people in that area. There are some tensions, by the way, within that town between the Jewish community and their neighbors. So are those things being explored? I haven't seen it. But generally what I would say is you have a series here. They want to portray it as some sort of woman's rebellion against a repressive lifestyle. That's not the way I see it. I see it as one woman's rebellion against any sort of social convention that restrains her temptations and her desire for fame and enrichment and her own self-gratification. So yeah, I don't really like the series. You're free to watch it if you find it entertaining. I found it to be sort of revolting. And that's about it. Please like, share, and subscribe. Also subscribe to me on all of the alternative media below. I might actually open a locals community through Rumble at a certain point because I heard that they're really partnering up. But if it's not worthwhile, I will not do it. But until then, you can find me on BitChute, Rumble, or Odyssey for video hosting, or on Gab and Minds if you just want to chat or comment back and forth, and support me through Subscribestar. And have a great night.